Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Franchise Association, Steve Caldeira.
Thank you and good morning. It's my pleasure to be back at the RLC. I had the privilege to be here 2 years ago and address you, and I've been involved for 15 years on the Advisory Council, and I want to thank David, Job, and the whole CSB team for doing an incredible job. It just gets better and better every year. We feel privileged to be here today to talk to you about a program that we've had at the International Franchise Association since 1991 called VetFran. And VetFran was essentially started to offer financial discounts from franchisors to veterans that wanted to get into small business ownership. Over the 20 years, until about 2011, we brought in 2,100 vets. But when First Lady Michelle Obama and Dr. Jill Biden made their call to private industry to recruit and retain more veterans, as 1 million vets were going to be coming back over the next 5 years, our board, we got together and we said, you know, we can do this. We know we already have 66,000 at the time veteran-owned franchise businesses. They do well in franchising for multiple reasons, which you'll hear about today. So we made a commitment back in September of 2010 to hire 75,000 veterans, military spouses, and 5,000 wounded warriors by the end of 2014. So I'm going to introduce a video. When we made that commitment, we did it at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in conjunction with the White House and the Chamber's Hiring Our Heroes program, which puts on job fairs around the country, about 400 a year. So when we announced that commitment, CNN called us up and they wanted to do a segment on our aspirational goals. So let's take a look.
When U.S. service members get out of the military, they may want something more than just a 9-to-5 job. That's where a new Veterans Administration program comes in. It helps former military members open their own businesses. Athena Jones has the details.
I got out March 1st of this year, so that was about 3 weeks ago.
Navy veteran Wade Franklin has big plans. After serving for nearly 7 years, deploying to Japan, South Asia, and Afghanistan, the former officer is going into business for himself.
You know, one good thing about the Navy is they really, you know, taught me how to make good decisions and how to, you know, manage things. And I felt, hey, I think I want to take a chance on myself.
Franklin is opening a UPS store, and this Virginia neighborhood is one possible location.
I know I don't have business experience. I don't understand the business world. That's a limitation there. But, you know, with franchising, I could really, they give you that support.
UPS waived the nearly $30,000 franchise fee for 10 veterans this year, and Franklin is one of them. He'll still have to invest thousands in getting the store up and running, so he's applying for a $170,000 loan.
They tell you how to run it, but you get to pay the bills.
Franklin found the opportunity at UPS through VetFran, a program that helps returning service members open franchises. VetFran has helped more than 2,100 vets go into business since the 1990s and wants to recruit 75,000 vets and military spouses to be franchise owners or employees by 2014. Steve Caldeira runs the program.
The franchising industry, it's a proven model. It's structured. It's very scalable, and one that lends itself well to veterans given the structure that they have to follow each and every day to be successful in the military.
The hope is that efforts like these will help bring down the unemployment rate among veterans. For post 9/11 vets, it's 7.6%, below the national average and nearly 5 points lower than a year ago. Franklin is just beginning the process and hopes to open shop by late summer. Any advice for other veterans who might want to try to do what you're doing?
Execute a plan, and any military member should know how to do that, whether they've been the person taking the order or the person giving the order. You know what the plan is, you know how to execute it.
Athena Jones, CNN, Arlington, Virginia.
So Wade Franklin opened his UPS store last week, so we're very proud of that. So that was aspirational. We had set goals. People wanted to know about it. So last year on Veterans Day, I went on Fox Business. They wanted to know where was the International Franchise Association against your goal after 1 year in announcing it. So take a quick look at this video because I think it helps to validate what the aspirational goals were. Then I'll introduce the panel and we'll get right into it. Thank you.
There may be no better way to thank veterans than helping them find a job. How one organization has given work to 60,000 of our returning heroes in just 1 year. At the end of the day, it's all about money. So your kids may look at today as just another day off from school, but in this day and age, we can't ignore the huge sacrifices our military make for us every day. The absolute least we can do is help them get a job when they get back from putting their lives on the line for us. Well, listen to this. Since 2011, the International Franchise Association has helped put more than 64,000 vets back to work, and they aren't nearly finished. Steve Caldeira is president and CEO of the IFA. Welcome to the show, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate being here.
Tell me about Operation Enduring Opportunity. Where did this idea come from, and what does it do?
Sure. Well, back in 1991, in the wake of the Gulf War, the International Franchise Association started VetFran, which essentially provided financial discounts for returning members of the military to get them back into the civilian economy. Why? Because we know that veterans are used to structure, they're used to systems. It's all about operational excellence. And if you look at the basic tenets that make franchising successful, those are the same tenets, the proven, structured, scalable model of franchising. So when the First Lady, Obama, and Dr. Jill Biden put out the call for businesses to step up, we took a look inside ourselves as an industry and said, you know what? We already know we have 66,000 veteran-owned franchise businesses in this industry.
Yeah.
They employ 815,000 people, and vets tend to hire vets. So our board got together and we tossed around a lot of ideas, and we said, you know what? We're going to commit to hiring 75,000 veterans, military spouses, and 5,000 wounded warriors by the end of 2014. And so, of course, you just referenced our study where we have said that in the first year, surveying 800 companies, member companies, by Franchise Business Review, that we've brought in almost 65,000 veterans and 4,300, Melissa, as small business franchise owners. Fantastic stuff.
If I can stop you just for 1 second, you know, it seems like franchises are a particularly good fit for veterans, which I think is so interesting because it takes a special person to open a franchise. I mean, it takes a certain amount of determination, bravery. I mean, you're not working for someone else. You're taking on the debt of opening a small business or working for a small business owner. According to the survey, 95% of franchisees said veterans are particularly good and fit for employment. And it's also interesting that the average veteran-owned franchise generates about $2.1 million versus all compared to other businesses with, other veteran-owned businesses that are not franchises generate about $500,000. Why do you think that this is a particularly good fit for vets?
Again, I think it goes back to their, you said it, their grit, their determination, their experience in following system, structure, operational excellence on the ground. So when you transfer those skills into franchising, which is being in business for yourself but not by yourself, as we like to say, formula entrepreneurism, veterans just really fit well. And again, you know, we have 1 million brave young men and women returning over the next 3 years. And we got to put them back into the civilian economy. So we believe that veterans are good for franchising, franchising is good for veterans, and most importantly, veterans are great for this country, and we need to find work for them. Look, we're at 7.9% unemployment, and we have 1 million vets coming back, so it's a bigger picture that we have to look at here.
Yeah, and it is a particularly hard time to find a job. I mean, there are, 16 million people who aren't working as much as they want to or not working at all. And you add veterans to that mix, do you feel like they should sort of be a step ahead of everybody else?
Well, look, here's what I know. I mean, they've risked everything. Some have given the ultimate sacrifice, and many are coming back wounded, severely wounded, the wounded warriors. What I can say is that they deserve an opportunity. You've got the 18 to 24-year-old bracket of veterans. There's a 24.8% unemployment rate. That's staggering, and it's really alarming, and we've got to do something about it. So we're hopeful that many other industries will follow,
the call by First Lady Obama and Dr. Jill Biden. We also work very closely with our friends at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and they're hiring our Heroes program, and I'll be with them later this week. But we're very proud of the results. We still have a ways to go, but we hope others fall in line, Melissa.
No, thanks for coming on Veterans Day here. I just thought it was so interesting that the stats really prove that this is a particularly good fit. Really interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Melissa. Appreciate it.
So that was last December, we have 15,000 more veterans, wounded warriors, military spouses to hire. I am confident that this Veterans Day, I will be able to announce that we've not only met that goal, but exceeded that goal. So now it's time to get to our distinguished panel. Jim Amos is an IFA Hall of Fame member and an IFA past chairman. He is chairman of D-Lite, Planet Smoothie, and Agile Pursuits, the franchising arm of Procter & Gamble. Jim served as a Marine captain in Vietnam, where he received 16 decorations, including the Purple Heart and Vietnamese Cross of Gallantry. Welcome, Jim. Sean Falk is a veteran multi-unit franchisee of brands including Great American Cookies, Salsaritas, Fresh Cantina, Pretzel Maker, and Mrs. Fields. He served as a Marine infantry officer in the First Gulf War and in Bosnia. Sean? Stuart Mathis is president and CEO of Quizno and a former member of the IFA board. He has over 30 years experience in franchising, including successful tenures as president of the UPS store and executive vice president of franchise operations at Domino's. He has been a stalwart supporter of VetFran for many, many years. Stuart, welcome. And last but not least, Jerry Pegram is a manager for PepsiCo, where he leads the Lipton category management agenda. Jerry also spearheads junior military officer recruiting efforts for PepsiCo. He is a West Point graduate, Army veteran, and remains active in the Army Reserve. So let's get right to the panel. Jim, I want to start with you. Could you talk to us about your own transition and what vets face as they leave the military?
Sure. I think there's perhaps two components to the answer. One is emotional, and the other is pragmatic. On the emotional side, when my brother and sisters returned back to our country from Vietnam, we were greeted by a country who was quite anxious to erase the memory of an unpopular war and almost by proxy essentially turned their back on the veterans. So the result of that was pretty dramatic for a lot of Vietnam vets. Most people don't realize there's about 58,260 names on the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C. That, by the way, we built ourselves. But more Vietnam veterans have committed suicide since that time than grace that wall. Many of us felt like we didn't want that to ever happen again. And so when I walked out the back gate at Quantico, Virginia, on this side of the gate, I was a captain of Marines. On the other side of the gate, I was lost. I didn't really know much about who I really was. My identity was gone, or how I was going to get to a place I didn't recognize. And one would hope that 35 years or 40 years later that would have improved, but the reality is that for many of our veterans, the proper assistance is not there. So that's the pragmatics, and if I could take a moment just to level set the depth of the problem, we have about 25 million veterans in our country. There are 3.7 million of those under age 39, 1.5 million on active duty, another 1.2 million in the Guard and Reserve, and all of their spouses. And then there are 2 million children, 75% of which are under age 12. The enormity of the challenges of repatriation, of being brought back into society is really unbelievable. And I think most of the citizen electorate or the citizens of America have little understanding or appreciation of what that really means and how big a challenge that really is. Job one, while there are many, many counseling issues, many services required, notwithstanding the wounded warriors, job one is a job. We can do a lot of things for our veterans, but most of all, they need a job. And we have now, over the next 5 years, 200,000 more veterans coming in for 5 years, another million being repatriated into our society, into a job market that has already about 20+ million unemployed. So the challenge is extraordinarily significant.
Jim, you've been around VetFran for a long time. You've been involved with the IFA. You're a past chairman. You know, you've been a strong leader in the industry. Tell me how VetFran, in your opinion, has not only helped D-Lite and the companies that you've been involved with, but the industry. So we had it for 20 years. We kicked it up a notch with Operation Enduring Opportunity in 2011. Give me your perspective on that.
Well, first of all, as a veteran who's been involved for about 30 years in this effort, Operation Stand Downs across the country, just many different things. There are literally hundreds of organizations that try to do good things for our veterans. The effort is largely uncoordinated. The funding is uncoordinated. And while the Office of Veterans Affairs can do some things, as General Shinseki shared with me a few months ago in Atlanta, it's very difficult because they're under the Department of Labor to get the kind of funding they need to meet the real needs of the veteran coming back, and there's some technology issues that are there. So when I look at VetFran and the effort that private enterprise, because I think the real help has to come from private enterprise, what I see is the first opportunity to establish a clearinghouse for the needs of these folks, to be able to track them when they leave the service and direct them to a place where they can get the kind of needs as we continue to expand this program going forward. So it's thrilling to me. It is also quite emotional in the impact. If you could just begin to appreciate the needs of these families, and here's the phrase particularly, when the guns go silent, there's some memory when we're still fighting. But when the guns go silent, there's often a great gap of silence that meets the needs of these people that we need to fill. And I think VetFran is markedly assisting us in doing that.
Sean, could you tell us a little bit about your path into franchising and what appealed to you about the industry?
Sure. So I was in the Marine Corps for about 8 years, and I always knew I wanted to be a small business owner. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I started looking for opportunities, spent a little bit of time in corporate America. But what appealed to me the most about franchising is this. A couple years ago, I gave a speech on Veterans Day talking about the VetFran program, and I had some veterans that were giving speeches with me, and we had a bunch of business owners like you guys out here standing there listening to me. And the thing that I said was, if I were to tell you about an organization that's out there that's already figured out everything, they've got operations manuals, rules, systems, logistics, supplies, they have everything figured out, and all you have to do is come in untrained and execute a system, and if you do it really well and you work really hard, you'll be pretty successful. Well, all of you guys might think that I'm talking about franchising, but I'm talking about the military. They've spent hundreds of years fine-tuning this process and taking an 18-year-old who knows nothing about how to fight a war or how to serve their country and taught them in relatively short amount of time. So now a military member like myself who is used to a system, especially a restaurant system like I am, we can come out and execute another system, and that's the franchise business model or a restaurant business model. So it's a very comfortable fit for us. And we know that we're going to come in and work very hard. We're tireless. We know what the mission is. We're very small unit leader oriented because when we're out in the field or in the middle of war, we have to make decisions on the spot right there, full of crisis all the time. And we have these calm ways of making a decision. Well, the same thing can happen when you bring a young military member into your organization. They're going to be a small unit leader. They're going to make decisions on the spot. They're executing a system. It's very comfortable for them.
Thank you. Stuart, we now have over 70,000 veteran-owned businesses, according to the U.S. Economic Census. And your path in franchising has been defined by veteran mentors like Tom Monahan of Domino's, Jim Amos, who you worked for at one point in time. What are the unique skills from your perspective that veterans bring to franchising, to piggyback a little bit off of Sean's comments?
Well, first of all, let me comment on my how my business career was influenced by those gentlemen you mentioned. Tom Monahan in particular, he was a Marine Corps veteran, and he really showed many of the attributes that veterans have. He was focused, he was hardworking, and he understood the need to institute and follow a system. Even today, I can recall Tom's 5 priorities in his life, which he didn't talk about, he lived. I mean, his first was spiritual. Your relationship with God was very important to him. Second was what he called, it was about family. He called it social. His third was mental, take care of your mind, expand your mind, always learn, always read. Fourth was physical. And the final and least important in his view was financial. You do the first 4, the 5th will come. And Tom was a very hardworking man. My fellow panelist, Jim Amos, exhibited the same kind of attributes when he hired me at the UPS store. And what I learned from Jim was the importance really of embracing the VetFran program and bringing veterans into your system as franchisees. Because they have discipline, they know how to follow a system. And in franchising, we would all agree as franchisors, those franchisors who are here, that it's critical that your franchisees follow your system and that you may achieve consistency from one location to the next. And veterans are very good at doing that and provide make great franchisees for the system.
Jerry, PepsiCo has a pretty robust veterans program in place. Why does PepsiCo find veterans so attractive as employees?
Sure, and I'll speak from more of a CPG point of view rather than a franchise point of view. And really, PepsiCo has a rich history of hiring veterans all the way back since 5 cents colas, and that trend continues today. We find veterans as valuable assets. When you talk about the skills, the experience, the drive for results, that's something that we feel that can help us win in the marketplace. And I think all of you here kind of realize that, hey, veterans are valuable assets to your company. And it's a great time in our nation to really leverage that talent pool that's about to come out. You heard Jim talk about the number of veterans that are about to come out now, so I think it's our responsibility as organizations to be able to receive them and really set them up for success. We talked about demonstrated leadership, innovation, diversity, mobility, ability to act well under pressure situations, ambiguous situations, high values. So I mean, the list goes on and on about why veterans are so important for your business.
Stuart, how have the brands you've been affiliated with benefited from their engagement with VetFran, and why does Quiznos find veterans so valuable that you completely waive your franchise fees, as you did while you were CEO of the UPS store?
Yeah, whether it's delivering a pizza at Domino's Pizza or shipping a package at the UPS store or making a sandwich at Quiznos. I mean, all 3 systems, all franchise systems have just that, a system. And getting veterans to come in who understand the importance of following a system, providing leadership to their teams, really makes them ideal candidates to be franchise owners. And in my experience, I look at all of our operations at Quiznos, for example. The veterans that we have brought in have shown that they have the skill set to really effectively run their operation and produce great results. And I saw that across all 3 brands that I work for, that the veteran franchisees, by and large, were those who were the best at executing, providing leadership, and creating results.
Yeah. Back to you, Jerry, for a minute. We've heard a lot about why we should hire veterans. But from your perspective and experience at PepsiCo, how should the restaurant operators that you folks work with, how should they go about recruiting veterans from your perspective?
Sure. I think it's a few things. One is how you brand your organization within the military. And what I mean by that is the great companies that hire military veterans for the last number of years, GE, Deloitte, Booz Allen, all these companies are companies that veterans have heard of. The last thing you want is a veteran come out of the military and said, hey, I never heard of that company. And that's that trust that they need as they transition. You talked about a little bit, Jim before said that veterans are coming for transitioning and having an interesting time as they transition. It's a very challenging time, so when they have a company that they can trust, they believe in, they've seen before, branding is key, and there's a few ways to do branding. One is support. How are you supporting veterans from your organization's lens? Are you going out and doing outreach? Are you building a franchise on a military base? Those type of things really help build your company's brand within the military. The second thing is education, and that's educating your hiring managers and helping them understand, hey, this is the difference between a staff sergeant and a captain. Here's how their experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan translate to our company, and really educating your folks to, again, set them up for success. Again, a challenging time. So we want to make sure that we're not failing these veterans and bringing them into a situation where they can add value and also develop. And I think those two things are critical. And the last thing I want to say is leverage your resources. So if you have military veterans within your organization, those folks, that's free resources, folks. I mean, these people can help educate your hiring managers. They can go out there and be a spokesperson for your company, and that's something a veteran can identify with. Okay, you've served, I served, how is your transition? And that sense of community and camaraderie is so important. So just putting those three things into place, I think, can really help you hire veterans the right way.
So let me ask that question to all three panelists. I'll start with Jim. How would you piggyback off what Jerry just said?
You know, I think that there's an element of this that's a function of understanding and education. As an example, for many years after Vietnam, there was this picture of the aberrant Vietnam vet, psycho vet, coming home with a hypodermic needle sticking out of his arm, which is just outrageous. I mean, it's just outrageous, and it's unfortunate that much of what we see in the media today, even with our returning vets now, is focused on maybe a fringe element that becomes hypersensitive to the marketplace. I was sitting in a meeting with the CEO of one of the largest insurance companies in America a few weeks ago. And he made the statement to me, well, you know, I'd really love to hire these veterans, but I just can't imagine where there's a place that they'd fit in my organization. And proceeded to tell me why. And, you know, as I said to him, listen, what you want in your business, what you want in anything that you're trying to succeed with, is people who are assets. And people who are assets have character, they have integrity, they have training, they have operational efficiency. In these cases, they often have security clearances. They have a commitment to win and a dedication and a passion that we end up in the world of franchising, and as an example, trying to instill into everyone that becomes a franchisee, and these veterans come back wired that way. I mean, my goodness, if you want to win, go up the hill with the people that can assist you in winning. So I think that's a large portion of this. It's just getting the word out about what kind of an asset are at their fingertips if they just take advantage of it.
Yeah. Sean?
Well, I think that from the day that any military person shows up to their training, they are constantly thrown obstacles in front of them. And their whole goal or life at that time is to figure out how to get over that obstacle. And I have to reinforce what Jim said, that wouldn't you want that kind of person in your organization that, you know, gets thrown a curveball but knows how to figure out a solution to it and doesn't give up? You know, I'll tell a story as well that I just got done last weekend serving as a volunteer for a triathlon camp for injured veterans. We had veterans there that were double amputees. We had blind veterans, other wounds that had been healed. I have never been motivated more by their perseverance. They taught me much more than I taught them on how to run a triathlon. And there was one kid there, 22 years old, Silver Star winner. He was a corpsman, Navy corpsman, attached to a Marine Corps unit. He ran through minefields, continued to fire on the enemy, all while saving the lives of Marines and Afghan nationals, awarded the Silver Star. At 23, he's out of the Navy now, and he's back in Connecticut. He was one of the first people to show up at the Newtown shootings, and he was the only one who had multiple bullet trauma experience. What a great kid. They gave him control of that site to manage that site. If I had a store in Austin, I would give him a management job immediately, because that's the kind of kid I want out there. And then there's another guy who, one of the W amputees, he talked about how the Army got him into this mess. It's the Army's fault that he was put in front of an IED and it blew off his legs. But he talked about how the Army gave him the resources to figure out how to persevere and how to win. So here's a guy who could easily sit in his wheelchair and give up on life, but he continues to push, and he's motivated, and he says he learned that from the Army. He's motivated to run triathlons with no legs and one arm that's half gone. What a great kid. Same thing. I would want that kid in my organization today.
So once we attract, do you want to add anything to that, Stuart?
Well, I would just say that I think that the VetFran program is good for business. I mean, you bring in the franchisee, former military people who make great franchise owners, and I think every franchisor looks for leaders in their franchisee communities. And by and large, the veteran franchisees provide the kind of leadership that the franchisor needs to move, whether it's a new initiative, a new product, a new whatever. And other franchisees look up to them and will tend to follow their lead sometimes. So they provide leadership. And besides the fact that it's good for our business, it's just the right thing to do to help veterans.
Yeah. So once a restaurateur, a franchisee has recruited a veteran into their operation, what steps should they take to onboard and retain them? Jim, do you want to start with that?
Well, look, I'm not so sure, Steve, that the steps would be any different than another owner or franchisee, but I will say this. I think the response to the delegation of leadership will be extraordinary in that instance. Give them everything that they are willing to take, and they will take the ball and run with it, and they will win. Or they'll die trying, to use an unfortunate.
Sean, you want to add anything on that?
No. I think that's good.
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Stuart, please.
Well, it's nothing that I've said before. There's many qualities veterans bring to any franchise organization, and I think that once you bring them on, I think they're easier to onboard because of the training they received in the military. And they understand, like I said earlier, the need to follow your system, to learn the nitty-gritty of what needs to be done to effectively operate your business. And so I think that that's what makes them ideal candidates to be a franchisee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wait, I will add something.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I think that a military veteran really likes the independence and the small unit leadership. So one of the things that I think that you can give them the most is the opportunity to lead and make decisions on their own. Give them a whole unit, give them a whole department, give them a whole part of your restaurant or the restaurant itself, and they're going to thrive on that.
Mm-hmm. Jerry?
Yeah, so during my research and talking with my peers and working with HR at PepsiCo, realized that there's a few things that military servicemen and women are missing when they leave, and that's camaraderie, that's a structure, and a sense of purpose. So I think within your organization, if you can help build those things, we talked about before a little bit of camaraderie. We have a great employee resource group called Valor at PepsiCo. That's a community in which veterans that come into the organization can learn from their peers that went through the same situations that they have through the military. If you talk about, we talked about sense of purpose, right? So that sense of purpose varies with each person, but it could be benefits, it could be compensation, it could be it could be really anything. It's location, it's career mobility. I mean, what is that your company provides that you can help deliver to that veteran candidate? And finally, the last thing was the structure. And I think what the vet franchises do really well is have that structure in place to set the veterans up for success. And I think when we talked about those companies that do that hire veterans really well, GE, I'll throw PepsiCo in there, why not? D-Lite, they have programs in place that veterans can kind of step into, learn, and add value. And I think going back to how do we attract veterans? Well, veterans will eventually come to you, right? Because you have the camaraderie in place, you have the structure in place, and then you use word of mouth, the referral system, networking. Hey, Coke's been awful to me. I really heard great things about PepsiCo. Tell me more about it, right? So that's how you get great veteran talent into your organization.
Jim, you and Stuart were at the board meeting in September of 2010 when we were discussing, should we get into this initiative? We knew that it was the right thing to do. We already had a program in place. There was vigorous debate. At the end of the day, everyone agreed that we should do something, and we threw some numbers out there that were pretty high. 75,000 veterans, military spouses, and 5,000 wounded warriors. And ultimately the board said, this is something we need to do. It's the right thing. As we said, veterans are good for franchising. Franchising is good for veterans, but most importantly, they're great for our country. So when we had that discussion, at the time, I believe we had about 325 or so companies involved. Now we have over 580, closing in on 600. The results we just saw in one of the clips, almost 65,000 veterans. Will pass that, we know, come Veterans Day this year. In your opinion, not only we've talked about why veterans do well in franchising, but there's a lot of industries in this country that still haven't stepped up yet. And we hoped that being one of the industries that were out there really grinding and working hard and trying to show leadership, that would inspire others. But yet, really, the Joining Forces initiative that the First Lady has been driving with Dr. Jill Biden, we could be doing more. And what do you think is holding that back?
Well, I'll tell you, frankly, based on 30 years of experience, everyone voices support for this effort. Everyone wants to step up and wave the flag and talk about the importance of veterans. But the reality is there's a commonality in the military where you recognize that sometimes you have to fight the battle twice to win it. Well, sometimes you have to fight it 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and multiple times to win it. So I just think that given where we've been, particularly in the business world since October of 2008, layered on top of everything else has just been the tremendous challenges that have been there for small business, particularly in all business in general. And so it's been an effort to get the attention of people, to continue to re-educate them, to help them understand expansively how important this is for them and their businesses. I was just thinking as these gentlemen were talking, how many times in the world of franchising have we said about a particular unit owner or operator who was struggling? How many times have you heard the phrase, well, they just refuse to follow the system? Goodness gracious, these are people that will remember how to follow the system. 45 years ago, before I went to Vietnam the first time, the Marine Corps taught me as a small unit commander, situation, mission, execution, command, communication, and admin and logistics, and it's plugged in my brain, and it'll never leave. These folks get the system. And so I just think it's a function of being willing to take the ball and run again and again and again and again, and thank God that well, frankly, Steve, with your leadership and what's happening on the VetFran side, that we're able to do something to move the needle. And hopefully that inspires other folks to do the same thing.
Yeah. Anybody want to add? Stuart, go ahead.
Well, if I can
And
interject
Jerry.
on
Yep.
I applaud the IFA for participating in, or really establishing the Operation Enduring Opportunity, which is setting a big goal for hiring veterans, for selling franchises to veterans. And I had the honor of joining the IFA to meet the First Lady. And, you know, talking about veterans and veteran education and providing job opportunities and business opportunities to veterans is really, it's a bipartisan issue. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat or independent. It's really an initiative that everyone can get behind. And I don't understand why any franchisor would not take the initiative to join VetFran to provide discounts to veteran franchisees, because it is good for their business and it's good for the veteran.
Yeah. Jerry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on a little bit, and I know IFA has done a fantastic job of not only walking the walk, but talking the talk, but also walking the walk. And you see many companies out there that'll talk the talk and not necessarily walk the walk all the way through. And I think we got to be careful. If we don't set our veterans up for success, what we don't want is them to leave your organization after a year, think about going back to the military, think about finding a new career path, and really put themselves in a bad situation. I mean, I think it's our responsibility, again, make sure they're set up for success, because it's a matter of national security if we're not putting these men and women who've served, who have strong capabilities to be leaders in our organization, and really set them up for success. So that's all I wanted to add.
Sean, you want to add anything?
I was just going to say that I think that we have to do a better job as leaders of redefining what you're getting in a vet. And you know, Jim said it perfectly a minute ago about it's an asset of a person who can solve problems and lead. And I think too often some companies are really looking for someone who's got experience in a particular thing. But if your company is strong enough, like PepsiCo or GE or some of the other private companies, if they're strong enough, they already have a lot of systems in place anyway. And so what you're really looking is for someone to come in and lead other assets, and that's what we have to define what our veterans are bringing back. Yes, we don't need firefighters, well, I'm sorry, gunfighters anymore in the civilian world, but that's not the only experience that they have.
Right. We've only got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything that we haven't touched upon relative to VetFran and Operation Enduring Opportunity, the value that vets bring? Not just to franchising, but to other industries. Is there any closing comments? I'll start with you, Jim, that you...
Well, no, look, the only thing I would hearken back to is, again, the expansiveness of the challenge and the problem. And while we're talking about veterans, I just want to remind everyone again, it's their families, it's their children, it's the extended families. It's about people who really went out to give everything for all of us. And I think it is not just good business. I think it's morally and ethically right to do everything that we can to assist these folks as they come home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Sean, closing comments?
Yeah, I would only say that I don't think veterans are looking for a handout or a gift, or they're not looking for just a gimme. All they want is to know that they have value to a civilian workforce, and the talents that they have learned are easily translatable into that environment. So it's not about giving them something for free. It's about just looking past some of the negative things about being in the military and recognizing how great of an asset they will be.
Stuart, closing comments?
Yeah, I would just like to ask all the veterans in the room to stand so we can give you a round of applause and thank you for your service to our country. Please stand.
Wow.
Thank you.
Jerry, closing comments?
Just continue to educate, continue to educate, continue to educate, and everything else will kind of fall into place. And we really need to focus on retention of our military talent pool. So,
how about a great round of applause for this panel, ladies and gentlemen? We are, before we introduce General Barry McCaffrey, we're going to close. One of the things we talked today was about education, outreach, to get the message out. We have been working very closely not only with the VA and the White House and the U.S. Chamber and the
Military Officers Association of America, and so many different veteran organizations. So we produced the video. It was a 9-minute video. For this presentation, we distilled it down to, I think, just about 3 minutes. And so we use this sort of as a recruiting tool. It lives on VetFran.com. It lives on franchise.org. Other organizations post it to their website. So let's take a look, and then we'll introduce General Barry McCaffrey. Thank you.
My name is Shiloh Allen Harris, retired Staff Sergeant of the United States Army. I retired March 2010 and have proudly served the Army on 2 deployments to Iraq. February 19, 2007, on a fairly routine day, my vehicle was struck by an IED. I survived with 3rd-degree full-thickness burns on 35% of my body, but I am here today and very proud to have served my country.
What people need to understand is that post-war, regardless of the situation, the country, by and large, has a tendency to forget, and we're already forgetting our most recent veterans.
During the first Gulf War, my father, Don Dwyer Sr., an Army veteran, launched the VetFran program. It was designed to help veterans live the American dream that they fought to protect.
I joined the military because I wanted to improve my personal life. While I was at Fort Myer, I was actually in a casket platoon, and I buried over 2,000 people. I learned responsibility, I learned respect, integrity.
I went into the Navy right out of high school. Franchising works well for veterans because it provides a set of rules, guidelines, systems to follow. That's what you do in the military.
The systems are huge, but the people are top-line professionals that stay in touch with us.
Veterans like to hire other veterans. When the tough gets going, they're not bailing on you to go do something else.
I'm Norm Miller.
Shiloh Harris.
Nice to meet you.
Joshua Barry.
Nice to meet you.
Win home
inspections.
I've waited 13 years for an opportunity like this to do something with my dad, a father-son type thing. I want to be a good role model for my daughter so she can look up to her dad, so she can say, my dad is something.
We matched up Shiloh with a small community bank that offered him a Patriot Express loan through the SBA program.
They were willing to take a bullet for the last employer. I don't know what kind of commitment that you're looking for an employee, but this shows a tremendous amount of commitment. They need to come home with dignity. I came home from Vietnam in the Vietnam era where people didn't respect what we did, and we came home with a little disgrace. Our soldiers are worth so much more than that today. We're a better country than that.
Veterans in our industry are still serving their country through franchising.
Veteran small business ownership is good for the economy, it's good for our communities, and it's good for our country. Thank you to the franchise industry for all your important work for veterans and small businesses.
Our brave young men and women fought for us all around the world, and now it's time for us to fight for them to bring them back into the civilian economy. Please visit VetFran.com to see how you can help, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you. When David Job said, Steve, we would like you to introduce General Barry McCaffrey, I said, my goodness, what a great privilege and honor that would be. And I said to myself, you know, the greatest champion that I had when we were trying to make a decision on what to do to answer the First Lady's call, there was no greater proponent or advocate or supporter of mine than this man to my right, Jim Amos. I mentioned before he's a past IFA chairman. He's in our Hall of Fame.
all-around great guy. And in the 3 years I've been in this position, no one has done more to help and guide me. So I felt it most appropriate to ask Jim, who served twice in Vietnam, to come up here and introduce the General. So he is one of my heroes. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Jim Amos, who will introduce General Barry McCaffrey. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it, brother. God bless.